How do you get smooth bow changes? It's a common concern amongst violinists that changing the bow creates unnecessary accents and it's very difficult to create a smooth bow. Before we go over how to actually do smooth bow changes, it's first important to understand what exactly they are. There's actually a difference in what I'm explaining and what I think often gets taught to young students. In my opinion, often, way too early, students are encouraged to, quote, hide their bow changes. This to me feels like asking way too much, way too early for many students. Hiding a bow change is a very specific technique, one that often we don't need to use at all. And yet for some reason it's emphasized very early on in a lot of violinists' learning. And as a result, you see a lot of this fear at the frog, where students are beginning to lift their bow, in some cases all the way out of the string to the point where we're actually losing the sound during the bow change. For some reason, many teachers, and as a result many students, have it in their mind that we need to hide our bow changes. And this is simply not true. Violin playing encompasses many different bow techniques, but at the center of all of them, perhaps the most fundamental of techniques, is the Detaché bowing. This is simply when we draw the bow back and forth from a down bow to an up bow. When doing a Detaché bowing, understand that it's okay to hear the bow changes. What we don't want to hear is accents. So when teachers, I think, often are explaining, please, let's not hear the bow changes, they don't mean let's not be able to tell that you're going from down bow to up bow. What they mean is they don't want it to sound accented. Notice the difference in these two examples. We're going to take that same 4-note descending scale, each of those changes I accented slightly. Let's try now to make smooth bow changes. We're not hiding the bow changes, but instead we're focusing on making sure that the bow changes aren't accented. You can definitely still hear the change of bow when I'm going from down bow to up bow, and then from up bow to down bow. This is perfectly fine. Most of the time when we play different notes, we want to hear that they are separate. That is the most standard of bowing, our Detaché bow. This is especially prevalent in separate bow faster passages. We can take this example from Canon in D. When we play that section, we often are asked to play it with separate bows, détaché. And in doing so, we hear the difference between the down bows and the up bows. We hear the changes in bow. But it's not accented, it's not off the string, it's simply détaché. If instead we wanted to play them as slurs, we could. Now, in theory, we could slur that however we'd like, but wherever we determine to put the down bows and the up bows, we'll always naturally have some form of obvious change. Now again, we're not accenting the bow changes, we just want them to be simple and smooth and beautiful. So for this video, we're talking about how to create good, smooth, comfortable bow changes, not how to hide bow changes. That will be a separate video. And if you want to make sure you don't miss that, be sure to subscribe. So let's describe what needs to happen in a good bow change, and then we'll go over 3 ways to practice. First, let's talk about the mechanics. In a good bow change, all we need to do is simply change direction. This means we need to make sure that there's no change in any of the variables that are important to making a good bow sound. So when making a bow change, make sure not to change the angle of the bow, the sounding point, the pressure, or the speed. One of the most common errors I see in bow changes, and I must admit I do it myself from time to time, is that the violinist will slow down the bow preceding the change. This will often create a noticeable diminuendo, which will result in whatever happens on the change of bow to be jarring. It could be jarring in the form of a sudden crescendo, or even worse, an accent. Let's demonstrate what that looks like. If we take an up bow, and we slow down the bow, we have a sudden decrease of sound, and by contrast, the down bow will always sound abrupt. I didn't even accent the down bow in that example, and it still stuck out. The opposite is also an issue that I see quite often, which is where the violinist will speed up the bow preceding the bow change. Let's see what that looks like. This is a more common problem at the tip. Perhaps that was too much of an exaggeration. Let's try a little simpler, a little more subtle. And that kind of speed up will often be accompanied by some unnecessary body movement. That will do the exact opposite. It'll create a slight crescendo, which may in turn hide the bow change, which is likely why the habit was created, but it can also as a result create this unnecessary crescendo at the end of bows. And if you hear that over and over again in someone's playing, it can be quite nauseating. The first thing that I like to do is I actually like to practice double stop open strings. This allows us to make sure that our bow level is absolutely consistent during the bow and during the string crossing. When playing double stops, there's almost no margin for string level, which means that you have to maintain a perfect string height while you play. This is going to be crucial during your bow changes. If your string height or your hand level is at all changing or fluctuating during a bow change, it can create some of these unwanted problems. So I like to practice long tones on a double stop. For today, let's do the DA. This is right in the center of our instrument. So it's pretty easy to get into the zone practicing that, hearing those drones and making sure that there's no variation in sound, or at least very little. If you're able to play these double stop drones without very much variation in sound, especially during the bow changes, then you're probably keeping a lot of these ingredients in check. You're making sure your sounding point is consistent, so is your pressure, so is your bow speed, and of course, so is your bow angle. And above all, when doing the double stop work, we're making sure to maintain our string level. Let's move on to the second way to practice our smooth bow changes. Changing bow at the frog is a lot more difficult than changing bow at the tip. This is because the frog is heavy, and as a result, we actually need to relieve pressure from the bow as we get past the balance point. So as we travel and we get past the balance point, which is right around here, we start to need to use more of our pinky and ring finger to take weight out of the string. And understanding how much work the pinky and ring finger have to do and how that increases and what rate that increases by as you approach the frog is a very important concept. And it's one that's going to be specific to your body as well as your bow and violin. So with this method of practice, we're going to take just the last quarter of the bow, roughly starting at the balance point or a little below, and just playing in that lower quarter of the bow. We'll start at the balance point roughly and do an up bow, and we're going to play quarter notes here. As we play these quarter notes, we feel, as we do our up bows, how the pinky works to maintain its curvature, how the thumb actually works to move and adjust for that new pinky pressure. The whole time we do these exercises, we're trying to focus on how these responsibilities in the fingers change. And eventually, with enough repetition, these kinds of things become intuitive, and we can start to see them manifest in the rest of our playing. Alright, the third and final way to practice these smooth bow changes, again, we're really focused on the frog here, is by using different finger combinations in the bow hold. This means letting off specific fingers. Let's start with the easy ones. Let's let off the index finger and the middle finger. So we're only using these three fingers while we play. In this one, we'll start at the middle of the bow and we'll use just the lower half. It kind of looks silly, but you learn quite a bit by doing it. In my case, one of the things that I noticed is very clearly how the pinky actually really wants the bow to tilt away from us as we get to the frog. And that's not only perfectly natural, it's perfectly right. As you get towards the frog, it's perfectly good technique in general to allow the bow to slightly tilt away from you. This allows the pinky to maintain its curvature as well as reduces the amount of hairs that are touching the string. These all together compensate for the extra weight of the frog so that we don't actually change the sound or volume of our bow just because we're playing at the frog. Now, of course, if we wanted a crescendo, we could avoid these and do the exact opposite. But we're not trying to avoid these. Right now, we're trying to create smooth bow changes, which means we want a consistent sound leading up to the bow change and a consistent sound right after the bow change. You can do any finger combination while you practice. Each one will teach you something different about your bow hold and perhaps the crutches that you have in your bow hold. Most likely, if you're having trouble with your bow changes, you'll find out that you overly rely on your index finger in general for your bow hold. But remember, when we get past the balance point and we play really in that frog region, the index finger doesn't really need to do much. So if you find that you need your index finger to play in that region, you're probably doing something wrong. Most likely, you need to develop more strength in your pinky and your ring finger, and more comfort in supinating the bow hold. With that, those are 3 ways to practice for a nice, smooth bow change. Not a hidden bow change. That'll be a future video. In case you want to see that or any other future videos, make sure to subscribe. If you like this video, please like it, and leave a comment below if you struggle with bow changes and what your solutions have been in your practice.